Once again, I'm going to be doing actually a weird thing with this. There's two chapters that are involved here. There's actually one quiz, I believe, that should be encompassing both of these, but I'm combining the muscular and skeletal system together. There's a lot of combined types of terms and other things along those lines that actually makes sense. So I'm going to go through the skeletal first, and then I'll go through the muscular, and then once again, this is going to be a highlight of these different types of things, and we're going to go through those relatively quickly. There's a whole lot more information in there, and if you need more sources about this, check out some anatomy and physiology, but I'll give a brief overview of that. When we're talking about the skeletal system is going to supply support to the human body so that it has a rigid structure to move upon. Without that rigid structure, generally you need to deal with like a water skeleton, which is how you end up working with, say, earthworms. That's how they move from place to place. They shift around their water using muscles and other things like that. Humans are vertebrates, and we have a skeleton. The human skeleton is made up of 206-ish bones with cartilage, tendon, ligaments that provide some sort of framework or skeleton for your body. The axial skeleton is the axis, so that is the skull, the spine, the ribs, and the sternum. And it's about 80 different bones. Otherwise, you have the appendicular skeleton or appendages that is going to be 126-ish bones, being part of the shoulder girdle, the hands, the pelvis or pelvic girdle, the legs, and the feet. If you're looking at a variety of different types of bones in the human body, here is a very, very brief overview. We have the skull, which is actually made of a variety of different types of bones that are all fused together. Generally, the cranium is the large hunk. There's the maxilla, which is here, and the mandible, which is your jawbone. The mandible is actually not directly part of the rest of your skull. It is attached to it using ligaments. You have your spine, which goes down the back. We have the cranial portion of the spine, the thoracic portion, and the lumbar portion. Thoracic portion is where the ribs are attached. Cranial portion or cervical portion is the neck. So it's the cervical, thoracic, lumbar. There are 7 in the cervical, 12 in the thoracic, and 5 in the lumbar. One way that you can remember that, which vaguely makes sense, is breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So you tend to eat breakfast around 7 a.m., lunch around noon or 12, and dinner around 5. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Down at the bottom of the lumbar vertebrae and at the very back of the pelvic girdle is the sacrum. You have the os coxa, or the coxal bones, which are these two different pelvic bones, and they're made up of a variety of different parts, 3 different bones specifically: the ilium, the ischium, and the pubis. Pubis is in the front, ischium is in the back, and the ilium is the big wings. Your axial skeleton also continues to have the clavicle, which is your collarbone, your scapula, your shoulder bones, your humerus, radius, and ulna. Radius is closer to the thumb because it's rad. And it also rotates. That's why it's called the radius. The ulna stays in place and is at the bottom. A couple other different types of terms that you may need to know. It's tibia and fibula. So it's not tibula and fibia, tibia and fibula. It's fibula. Femur. Carpals are in your wrist. Tarsals are in your ankle. Metacarpals are your hand bones. Meta, meaning beyond. So it's the metacarpals or the metatarsals. Phalanges actually exist. Those are your fingers and your toes. That's a brief overview of the human skeleton. There's more information that you can end up learning throughout the whole entire process. Your skeleton is made up of bones and cartilage. Tendons attach bones to muscle. Ligaments attach like bone to bone. This term is hematopoiesis. Hematopoiesis. It's blood formation, and that happens inside of long bones for the most part, and flat bones. But it happens inside of red marrow. Bones are the primary portion of the skeletal system. They're mostly osseous tissue. So if you see os, that has to do with bones. Osseous is bone-like tissue. So it's mostly a variety of different types of chemicals that form together a cement-like structure, which makes bones. Bones begin to develop early on during the fetal life as cartilage and then get replaced by bone in a variety of different types of ways, either endochondral ossification or intramembranous ossification. Endochondral ossification is taking a bit of cartilage, so it's endo, meaning inside of, chondral, meaning cartilage. So if you see chondra, that is cartilage as opposed to os, which means bone. So endochondral ossification is the bonifying inside of cartilage. Bones will end up essentially making calcium deposits in cartilage, which makes it so that they stop working, and then it keeps on going. Once you hit about age 35, you start losing your bones unless you start using your bones. Bone shapes. Bones are made up of a variety of different types of shapes, but generally they are either going to be long bones. Those are the traditional types of bones that you end up thinking of in your body. They have a shaft, an epiphysis, and a diaphysis. So the shaft or the diaphysis, and then the epiphysis is at either end. So at the formation between two bones, they are called an epiphyseal plate, epiphyseal, or epiphyseal line. So this is a radius in ulna. You have a condyle at one end, or a condylar connection point. So those are long bones. Short bones are small and generally don't have a long shape between them, but are formed in a fairly similar type of way. Sesamoid bones live inside of a tendon, so like the patella. Flat bones are flat and tend to be made by a process. Instead of endochondral ossification, they use intramembranous ossification, or ossification that occurs between two membranes. There's irregular bones, like vertebrae, that have structures that are similar to long bones and structures that are similar to flat bones. And then sutural bones, which generally are just bones that suture together. So, as I was referring to before, there are different portions of a bone: the epiphysis, the metaphysis, and the diaphysis. And then there's also different types of bones. Compact bone, inside of the compact bone, so there are rings of bone. There's a medullary canal or a medullary canal that goes down the middle. The endosteum, and then there's also spongy bone. So compact bone is like tree rings, and spongy bone is like a sponge. So it's a matrix of bone. Other different types of terms that you... Oh, that formatted awkwardly. Sorry about that. Other different types of terms that you may need to know about bones. Condyle is a round projection that enters into a formation of a joint. The crest is a ridge. A fissure is a slit between two bones. A foramen is a hole. Foramen. Fossa is a depression. The head is at the end of a bone. So if we were to draw a bone on my board up here, so this is a femur. The head of the femur is this portion. Okay, the condyles are going to live here and here. A process is a large portion of a bone that protrudes out of the bone. So those are, and meatus, not meatus, meatus, is going to be a tube-like passage or canal. An air cavity between bones are sinuses. Generally, these exist in your facial bones. Spine is going to be the portion that extends out of a bone. A sulcus, you'll see a sulcus or plural sulci, is a groove or a furrow depression. This is trochanter. Trochanter. Imagine that the H doesn't exist. Trochanter are bony projections on the neck of the femur. Tubercle is a small rounded process. A tuberosity is a big rounded process. There's a couple of different types of joints as well. Fibrous, cartilaginous, and synovial. Or there's a variety of different types of movement that you should probably look at. The easiest way to remember any of these is actually doing the movement that's associated with them, and then it should hypothetically help out. When it comes to these, remember, as I have said before, to watch out for ab versus add. Ab is subtract, add is add. More terms. I talked about the cervical, thoracic, and lumbar. There's the vertebral column. Good times. The other thing to know about is that there's the atlas and the axis. The atlas is holding up the world, like Atlas does. It's at the very top of the vertebral column. The axis allows your spine or your head to rotate. So that's why it's called axis. And it rotates on something called the dens, which is actually literally referring to teeth. Different types of fractures. This actually might be useful for you, but there's a variety of different types of fractures that you may potentially need to know. One of the weirder ones is the green stick, and I don't exactly know why it's called a green stick, but if you want to see more of a description of any of those, look at the appendix. More fractures.